good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to this week's podcast, 5 things every recruiter should do in the next sales meeting to drastically increase your chance of winning a client on the right terms and for the right fee. Terry, again, you used to speak just to check the sound before we dive right in.
Yeah, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whenever you listen to us, and welcome. And I hope you can hear us loud and clear.
Perfect, awesome. Again, if you're listening on Facebook in the Make More Placements Facebook community, drop a comment and let me know. So if you're watching live, write live in the comments. If you're watching the replay, write replay. Let us know how you're tuning in. Again, if you're listening to the recording of this podcast on either YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever, again, remember to like and subscribe. Also remember that the first place to get access to these trainings is the Make More Placements community. So if you're not already a member, make sure you head over to Facebook and join that. And yeah, today we're going to be talking about 5 things every recruiter should do in their next sales meeting to drastically increase your chance of winning a client on the right fee and on the right terms. So, increasing the sales, winning higher fees, and doing it repeatedly comes down to, you having the right sales process in your recruitment or search business. And without having the right sales process, you find yourself, constantly reducing your fees to win the business, right? This is the clearest sign that clients don't actually value the work you put in. You find yourself, winning the business, but on bad terms. So that could be winning the business and, the payment terms are late or the fee's not right, whatever it is terms that don't actually suit you, but they suit the client. And it could be that you're winning business, but you're having to compete with, agency after agency to fill the same role, right? And when that happens, again, that's part of the parcel of contingency, but the more and more other agencies competing with for the same vacancy, your fill rate is going to drop, which means you're more likely to do the work and not get paid as well. Terry, anything you want to add to that in terms of, I guess the importance of, having the right sales process or doing these 5 things in every sales meeting going forward?
Yeah, here's what we know. If you talk to most recruitment and search business owners, they say something like this: Terry, if I can just get in front of the decision maker, the hiring manager, I'm in with a chance to get in the business. I then ask the question, so what is it that you do that when you get in front of the hiring manager, you win the business? And for many recruitment and search business owners that we speak to, they're unable to define what it is that they can do. But here's what we know. If you've got a process that isn't working, you may need to change it. But if you don't know what that process is, it's kind of difficult to change it. By the same token, if you've got a process that's working, then that's what you should be sharing with the other members of your team. But for many recruiters, they haven't got the process. And what we're going to be talking about, there's some things that you can put into your process that will solve a lot of the challenges that you're having, will solve you getting business on bad terms. It will solve you sending through CVs or resumes and the clients ignoring you or competing with other recruiters. There's some fundamental things that you can do to avoid that. And if you've got a team of recruiters, by the way, and you get them all to follow this process, it will literally, it sounds like it's a bold claim here, it will literally double your sales. If you follow this process, it will double your revenue. Of that, there's no doubt whatsoever. And we'll go into them now.
Yeah, I think, some of the things, what we're going to share with you, these are the 5 simple things, right? Some of them you may be doing already. Some of them you may not be, right? But what we found is that with the vast majority of recruiters that we speak to, you'd have maybe, especially when it's a bigger business, a handful of people doing it, but even they're not doing it regularly, doing it hit and miss. And I think, as a whole, when it comes to sales process, one of the biggest mistakes we see or biggest problems we see, that a lot of it's ad hoc, right? There's no system, there is no process, right? Sometimes they're doing all the right things, sometimes they're doing none of the right things, sometimes they're doing some of the right things, it's a bit hit and miss. So we wanted to give you like 5 simple things that really, no matter what stage you're at in business, whether you're a new business, whether you're more established, that you can start doing right now that are gonna help you secure more of those clients. Again, it's not just about winning business, right? Winning business is the easy part, but it's about doing it for the right fee and on the right terms as well. And we're talking about, finding or winning business with clients who are ready and willing to pay the fee you actually deserve for your services, payment terms that massively boost your cash flow and not just your revenue, and finding that, clients who want to work with you exclusively because they actually trust you to deliver on, what they're asking to do, right? So we're going to dive into the 5 things now. Again, don't forget to like, subscribe, if you find this useful, let someone else know as well. You probably know someone else who will find it useful as well. So let's dive into 5 things. So look, Terry, I'll let you lead it, but number 1 is to agree on an agenda with the hiring manager, with the prospect. Again, can you sort of very briefly tell us why that's important?
Yeah, there's a great book written by Stephen Covey. It's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of the habits he talks about there is start with the end in mind. Going into a meeting with the end in mind and agreeing that with a hiring manager will transform the outcome of the meeting. And one of the ways to start with the end in mind and having that agreement with the hiring manager is to come up with an agenda, and an agenda that both you and the hiring manager agree with. So you actually prepare an agenda, the areas that you want to cover. You then give it to the hiring manager, say, these are the areas I'd like to cover. Is that okay with you? Here's what will happen. They will look at the agenda, they will look down and they go, yeah, that's fine. You simply add, is there anything else you'd like to add to this agenda? Now you've got the agenda that both of you have agreed that you're gonna adhere to in this meeting. And you see what's happened in that? You've now taken control very subtly of the meeting and the things that you're going to cover in this meeting. Now, ideally in every meeting, we would say, yeah, but Tara, I want to go in there and I want to win the business. And let's be fair, you can't always go into a meeting and win every business. At the very least on your agenda, by all means, have that on your agenda, what we need to get started or worse to that effect, but certainly have something like the date of the next meeting. Because it may well be, for whatever reason, you can't close this meeting here and now. But what you can do is agree when you're going to talk again. And all the other points are the points that you need to cover. But you can only do that with an agenda. So use these 19 words at the beginning of the meeting. Mr. or Mrs. Hiring Manager, I want to make sure you get the best of this meeting. So I've drawn up an agenda and you simply hand it over to them and you ask them the question, is that okay with you? The moment you've done that, they've agreed to that agenda. Does that make sense, Drew?
Yeah, it does. And I think, again, this is sort of basic at one level, but again, I think because it's basic, it often gets overlooked and people don't realize the importance of it. But I think the metaphor we often like to use is like it's like baking a cake, right? You can have all the right ingredients. If you don't follow the right recipe and do it in the right order, you're very unlikely to replicate the same results. And right, same with sales. You could say and do all the right things, but if you're not controlling the order of those things that are said, or doing or things that are done, you're very unlikely to get the outcome that you want, right? So to have a successful sales process, things need to be done in, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. If you're not controlling that and you leave it down to the client, again, you're significantly decreasing your chance of making a sale for the right fee and on the right terms. Terry, does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And not only leaving it down to the client, think about it for a minute. If you haven't got the process, and some clients say to us, recruiters that is, I say, how do you do it? And they say, well, I just know, I kind of just go with gut reaction, or I just wing it. Think about that for a moment. If as a business owner, you've got a business, and I say to you, how do you get business? And you say that you just wing it. Imagine that you're going away on holiday, and the pilot, you get talking to the pilot, and the pilot, you say to the pilot, how do you get from A to B in this aircraft? And the pilot said to you, I just wing it. You'd think, what the hell? Think about whatever team you're supporting, whatever sport that you follow. And you talk to the manager and they said, we just swing it. You would be disappointed, to say the least. But in our experience, I would say something like 70% of recruitment research business owners that we speak to, what they're doing is they're just swinging it. And if you've got a team of consultants, by the way, the 80-20 rule there applies. You've got 20% of your consultants that are underperforming. They're probably not winging it, but the majority are just swinging it because there is no process. What would it mean to you if you had this kind of process? An example, the first example is you had a well-defined agenda of exactly where this meeting is going and what the next step is after this meeting. Cheers, Drew.
Awesome. So number 1 is a green agenda. Number 2 is ask for a retainer. Again, Terry, I know it's sort of like a
retainer or exclusive, Drew.
A retainer first, and it's so number 2 is ask for a retainer. So again, I know this is a topic that sort of splits opinion in the recruitment industry. Again, with some going down the contingency route, some prefer to go down the retained route. Terry, I guess from our point of view, why do you think it's important that every recruiter asks for a retainer in their sales meetings?
First of all, to explain, majority of recruiters work on what's called the contingent model. So they say to the hiring manager, yeah, give us the job orders and we'll look for these candidates to see if we can find them. But the average contingent recruiter will fill between 20 and maybe 50% of the roles they're working on. By the way, if you're at 50%, you're at the very high end. But most recruiters, most of the job orders they work on, they do not fill. but they celebrate winning the job orders. But most of the time you're working, you're not getting paid. So that's a contingent model. On the retained model, when the client trusts you and your expertise, the client will pay you a percentage of the fee up front, because the average retained recruiter will fill 90% of the roles that they work on. So ultimately, a retained recruiter works less but earns substantially more than a contingent recruiter. So at the very least, ask for the retainer. Now, I want to be absolutely clear and full disclosure here. Most hiring managers will not agree to pay you on the retainer. I'm not disputing that at all. However, I can actually guarantee this: a hiring manager will never ever pay you a retainer if you don't ask for it. They will never ever pay you a retainer if you don't know how to ask for it. Because unless you can communicate the benefit in the hiring manager paying you a percentage of the fee up front, why the hell would they? Added to which, if you as a recruiter don't believe you deserve to get paid up front and to work on a retained basis, you're going to find it really difficult to do so. So there's a lot that's going on, but at the very least, ask for the retainer, because then your fill rate goes from, say, 20, 30% to 90%. As I said before, on the retained model, you will work less and earn more on the retained model. We've all been around as recruiters where you've worked on job orders and you've got down to the final, your candidate's down to the final interview, and for whatever reason, it falls through. The job goes on hold. The candidate withdraws. A candidate comes from somewhere else, but you're going to lose out through no fault of yours because you're working on the contingent model. On the retained model, you get paid a percentage of the fee whether you fill that role or not. So in fact, what you do is you get paid for the work that you do, which, I don't know about you, but it seems reasonable if you're going to do some work that you get paid for it, rather than most of the time you're working as a contingent recruiter and you don't get paid for it. Does that make sense, Drew?
No, it does. And again, it's just about asking the question. I think a lot of the time, I think a lot of recruiters want to get retained, see the benefit of getting paid up front. I mean, you didn't even mention cash flow there, but most recruiters see the benefit of it, but they don't ask, and therefore they don't get, and therefore it's almost like they start believing that, oh, my industry don't pay retainers. And it's, well, yes, because no one in the industry is asking for retainers, right? You'd be the one to start asking. Again, maybe some people are going to say no, maybe most people say no, but we say yes, you're going to get paid up front, it's going to boost your cash flow. You're going to get commitment from both sides as well, which I think is an important point, right? So it's commitment from the client to use you and use you exclusively. They've paid to use your services. They've agreed that they're going to use you, and they're actually even committed to hire. Sometimes with contingency, you can find yourself doing a search, but being, almost being used to do research for the client without actually getting paid, right? With a retainer, you're getting commitment from the client 100%, but it's also commitment from you as well. I mean, one of the arguments I hear against retainers is, from recruiters, is that, what if I don't want to work the role? What if I can't fill it? And I think for me, the other side of retainer is, it's actually commitment from you to the client. You're committing to the client that I am going to work and fill this role, work it till it's filled, right? And I think that's a very important part as well, is that you're committing to delivering what you actually promised to deliver to the client. Terry, does that make sense?
Perfect sense, and that's a really good point there, Drew. A couple of good points you made there. First of all, you can get paid for the work that you do, so it substantially increases your cash flow. And going back to contingent model, you do the work today in month 1, the candidate doesn't start until month 3, you don't get paid until month 4, but you did the work in month 1. It doesn't make sense. And I think the other point you made there about the commitment. See, if a client's paid you a retainer, they're not going to give this job order to half a dozen of your competitors as well. The client's now agreed to work with you exclusively. And one of the reasons, by the way, why your fill rate goes up to 90%. And if you don't think you can fill the role, don't take it on. As a contingent recruiter, by the way, why would you take on the role if you don't think you can fill it? There is no point whatsoever. So you only take on roles on the retained basis if you honestly believe you can fill it. If you can't fill it, whether it's retained or contingent, don't take it on. Don't waste your time or the client's time either.
Yeah, 100%. So that brings us on to number 3, which is, and again, this is more to ask if you don't get a retainer, right? So this is when people say no to the retainer, and that is to ask for exclusivity. Terry, again, can you explain in your words why that's important?
Yeah. So As I said before, most hiring managers will not work on a retained basis, but do the numbers on it. If you ask 4 hiring managers for a retained piece of business, maybe 75% of them will say no, but it just means that you get 1 retainer. So you go, well, actually, if I do the numbers right, then I ask 8 hiring managers for retained business, you get 2 retainers a month. So we've got recruiters that, who would do $1 million a year, but they're only doing 2 placements a year. So 2 placements a month, but each placement's worth about 40,000. So that's the advantage of the retained. But some clients will say no. I want to be absolutely clear about that. But the very fact they say no, there's something psychological going on. Nobody likes to be rejected, and they don't like to reject other people. So it does create some discomfort with a hiring manager when you ask for a retainer and you give them the reasons how they're going to benefit from it, but they still say no. But if they say no to the retainer, it's now worth asking for their exclusive, because there's a very good chance, as long as you've got in there before everybody else, that they will give you that work on their exclusive because of that discomfort. Again, it's important that you communicate the benefit to them, not about you, but the benefit to them as a hiring manager, why they should work with you exclusively. If you know what the benefit is, you can communicate that to the hiring manager. Now you're working exclusively with that hiring manager. By the way, your fill rate will now go to 60, 70% on exclusive. Amongst other things, you're not competing with anybody else. It's just you working on this role. See, many contingent recruiters talk about a shortage of candidates, but it's interesting that it's mainly contingent recruiters that talk about shortage of candidates, whereas retained recruiters don't. But if you ask a contingent recruiter, Drew, shortage of candidates, but do these roles get filled by somebody else at some stage, by one of your competitors? Invariably, the answer is yes, they do. So is there a shortage of candidates, or does it really mean that your competitors are getting there before you and finding these candidates? Hey, and by the way, if these roles don't ever get filled by anybody, then you need to look at the job spec and talk to the hiring manager about that, because perhaps they're asking for a candidate that doesn't exist. And again, that's a conversation worth having with a hiring manager.
Yeah.
So to repeat, if you work exclusive, your fill rate increases substantially because you're not competing with anybody else.
Yep, 100%. And I think even if there is a shortage of candidates, that's even more reason to work retained or exclusive, because
absolutely,
you know, rather than having to work 10 roles to fill 2 and having to find candidates for all those 10 roles, you can just work 2 and find candidates to fill those 2 roles, right? So again, it's even a bigger argument to go down that route. So Terry, number 4 is agree interview dates. Again, why is this important?
Yeah, and this, by the way, all these things should be done. These things should be in the agenda before you start working on the assignment. Look, I'm a former recruiter. We've all been those recruiters where you find, we used to call them, you find the candidates on steroids. You know, the candidate that ticks all the boxes, and you're so excited about this candidate, and you say to the candidate, "Hey, listen, you tick all the boxes. I'm going to get straight back to the hiring manager, and we're going to set some interview dates." And and you're thinking to yourself, "This candidate's so going to get the role." You then chase the hiring manager for the interview dates. The hiring manager's busy. Then you've got the candidate chasing you saying, "Have you got the interview dates yet?" And you go, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm still waiting to hear from the hiring manager." And this goes on. And in today's climate in particular, that candidate's also looking at other opportunities as well. Here's what you should be doing. Before you actually start the assignment, agree the dates that the client will be interviewing the candidates before you start. So when you meet those candidates who, as we used to say, are on steroids and tick all the boxes, you can say to them there and then, "The hiring manager will be interviewing on the 10th of next month between these times. Can you make yourself available? And I will just finalize the exact time that your interview will be held." Now what's happening? You're managing the project, because if you haven't got that interview date, you're not managing it, because you're beholden to the hiring manager getting back to you with the interview dates. And it's a very simple question to ask. "Hey, listen, Mr. or Mrs. Hiring Manager, to ensure that you don't miss out on the best candidates in this competitive world, can you give me the dates now that you will be interviewing these candidates? I suspect I can get these candidates to you within 3 weeks. So any date after 3 weeks from now should be fine." And you've got those in. Can you see the advantage that gives you? And by the way, if your competitors aren't doing that, can you see the advantage that gives you over your competitors as well? Because most recruiters don't ask for the interview days before they start the assignment. Anything to add to that, Drew?
No, 100%. I think you covered that perfectly. So that brings us to number 5, which is agree dates for feedback. Again, can you give us an overview of what we mean by that?
Yeah. So again, we've all been there as recruiters. That fantastic candidate, that candidate on steroids who ticks all the boxes, has been for the interview. The candidate gives you a call immediately after the interview saying, what a fantastic organization and what a great hiring manager. And you'll say to them, look, if you get offered this, would you take it? Hell yeah, of course I will. This is my dream job. This is what I've always wanted to do. You're thinking, great. Now all I need to do is speak to the hiring manager and get their feedback on this candidate. So you call the hiring manager, you email them, nothing. Why? Because you didn't agree the dates that you would be calling the hiring manager to get the interview. Again, in the meeting itself, ask those questions. Repeat, ask the date of the interviews. Ask the dates that you can jump on the call for 15 minutes to discuss each candidate for feedback. You see what's happening again? You're now in control of what's going on. I want to repeat this. Most of your competitors are not doing this. This gives you quite an edge. Even if you're working on contingent, exclusive contingent, it still gives you quite an edge. You'll fill more roles by doing it this way. Back to you, Drew.
Awesome. Nothing to add to that, Terry. Again, just to recap, number 1, ask agree an agenda. Number 2, ask for retainer. 3, ask for exclusivity if you don't get the retainer. Number 4, agree interview dates. And then number 5, agree dates for feedback. Again, this is the Make More Placements podcast. Again, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're listening on iTunes, Spotify, or any other podcast platform. If you're listening to Make More Placement community, remember to comment, let us know your thoughts if you've got any questions as well. We'll be back at the same time next week. Until then, take care, take action, and be relentless.
Thanks for joining us, folks. Take care.